that Devon Franklin and Megan Good are getting divorced. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm not too surprised, honestly, and I don't mean that to put anybody down, but just I remember when their relationship first started, coming off the heels of, Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man. I read that book, so I took a similar mindset, like before I learned in the game, before I started learning anything about like sociosexual dynamics, to the extent that I've learned over years. So when I had that mindset, I've already kind of seen how that can go bad in a relationship to do things that way. So when I saw that they were pushing that purity culture, I knew some things wouldn't go along with it. So I felt like there's a good chance that some of those mindsets within that type of thing wasn't going to work out.
So can you explain, like, what are those mindsets you're talking about as far as act like a lady, think like a man, and how did that, how was that detrimental to their marriage?
Well, I'm only speaking from the outside looking in, so I can't say exactly what happened, but I can look at certain things that I saw like in interviews or in like quotes from them and stuff like that. But I think what I saw from it is that mindset of not seeing sex as part of getting to know somebody, not establishing sexual compatibility before you make a long-term commitment. The way that can cloud a man's judgment in his vetting process, because he's thinking about the sex he's planning to begin later. There's a lot of different things that can come with that. Also, a woman having to push herself in a box of being less sexual in order to be seen that particular way is something that can be detrimental to her ability to really tap into her full sexual side after you establish the relationship. Like on one side, what may happen is before you get into that sexual relationship, you already, either she doesn't have a lot of experience or she's telling you she doesn't, so you just don't know, so you're just going in blank, so you don't know her history, you don't know what she has experienced, you don't know what the benchmarks are, and you may not know if you have the experience to do those type of things. And then there's the instance of finding those things out later, and then there's also just like instances of what else could be going on. You do know, but you're expecting that because you waited, that God's just magically gonna bless your relationship, so that all those experiences she had before, she's gonna be able to have with you too. And the thing to think about it is, there's something called new relationship energy, NRE. There's a certain thing about if you take advantage of that newness when you meet a person, that when you take advantage of that novelty that's there before you really get to know each other well, you get to not build up as much of a idealized picture of who you see the person as. I know people say that sex clouds your judgment, but oftentimes for a man, not having sex clouds your judgment. And if you want to talk about masculine and feminine dynamics, part of that process of what I call masculine feminine dynamics, dom sub dynamics, part of sociosexual dynamics is for two people to get on the same page. But the issue is this: almost no two people are going to be 100% on the same page, which means that if you try to completely run a relationship off of who's equal, the person who's less emotional is going to be the person in control. And if the person who's less emotional is the person who's in control, but who is attracted to strength and dominance, then you can try to be as kind and considerate and communicative as you want to be, but at the end of it, you're going to have to part ways. It's what I call the fork in the road, right? And masculine feminine dynamics, if we're talking man and woman, and dom sub dynamics can go outside of that as well. But typically as a man, you're going to have a certain level of masculinity that's inside of you that's going to make it difficult for you to go all the way over to being feminine. Now, for some men, there may be an exception, but for most men, that's how it's going to go. And then for most women, they have a certain, and that's just male nature. And then a woman, she has a certain level of female nature that's going to be up under the surface. So even if she tries to take the masculine role, oftentimes it's going to be prematurely integrated from a place of insecurity, right? And if that premature integration comes from a place of insecurity, then what's going to happen is this: a woman may try does it by turning her sexuality off in order to think logically about a man. So the next part, I guess, would be when I watched this video where they talked about how they met and how they got married, and they were working on the movie set Jump the Broom. And when they were working on Jump the Broom, Megan Good said that she saw Devon Franklin, said that's the type of man that I'd want to marry. Now the issue is this: when you haven't lived a certain life and walked in certain steps, and you just idealize a certain type of person or mindset, and you haven't actually experienced that, and you say, you know what, that's what the type of life I want to live, just on an emotional basis, because that's kind of what I'll consider like a mix between Topangas and Sage Burners. That's like the reformed, you know, the newly celibate, like in Jesus' name type of thing, or the newly abstinent thing. So it's like, for Megan Good, she went through some bad spots with dudes, and then she said God told her to be celibate. Now for me, that's not something that's impossible, but people are going to hear God through what their viewpoint is, through their social programming, through the lens. So even if he says one thing, they might take it as something else. So she went celibate, right? And then she said God told her that Devon Franklin was going to be her husband. In church, that is typically a big red flag. What I'm guessing probably was that she was just in an emotional state from her prayers, and was like, you know what? My emotions tell me this is what I need to do. My ego's telling me this is what I need to do in order to feel like I'm doing the right thing. And it seems like she took a very logical perspective to wanting to be with Devon Franklin. Like, just the fact that she had the ability to wait all the way till they got married, if that's what they did, that's a sign that she may not have been feeling him on that level as much anyways. But then another thing to think about it was, throughout their marriage, I didn't hear any talks of them trying to have children in that 9 years. And they started marrying, I think she was 31 when they got married. So that's a certain level of masculine energy. You know, the thing is this: you don't want a woman to choose you on a logical basis. I know it sounds good to say, you know, just get all the looks, money, and status, just get in the gym. Hey, there's nothing wrong with building your sex appeal. That's dope. And if getting in shape is better, is part of that for you, then that's real. But the issue is this: it's not about just trying to make the outside look masculine, make the outside look attractive and appealing, and then just to build your career and all these things on a mindset of sexual purity, and then think that the moment you get married that's automatically going to just stop. No, sexuality is not a faucet. When you repress sexual energy, you think it's just going to turn back on the moment that you get married. Either y'all going to be dipping and dabbling into it while you're dating, and if you have sex negative views, it's going to make you feel like it's going to create a gentleman gigolo complex, to where the fact that she's willing to go against her desires to do that is going to cause her to put you into a box to where it's going to cause her to put you into a box where she sees you as someone who's between her and her relationship with God. You can't, you know, you can win that battle, but just because you can win that battle doesn't mean you're going to win the war. There's a lot of things that come with that. So I remember just throughout their marriage, she never changed her last name to Franklin. You know, she was constantly dealing with the pressures of trying to fit in with being a minister's wife, because that's the position that she desired. See, as a man, you got to prepare a woman for the position that she's going to be in. That's what part of leadership is. So if you just do this quick, 90-day, 6-month dating process where you're being celibate and horny and overlooking, after a certain point you're going to start overlooking stuff because you're ready to get it in. Unless you've been doing it already, and then now you look like you're not standing 10 toes down on your program. So now there's a lack of trust because you're not standing on what you say you believe in. So now you're in a tough spot. Because I remember just watching this and keeping up with it a little bit, just seeing little things here and there. And then they said, they broke up due to irreconcilable differences. Something I always say is this: if you can make love, you can make up. Real shit. And it's not going to be something that's going to work all the time. But what I basically mean is this: if you don't have any way of inserting your masculine energy into the situation and preparing or and repairing the dynamic, once you start going through sexual polarity erosion, and sex is a conduit. It's not the only one, but it's a conduit for that. And if you can do that, and then as you're trying to resolve conflict, then you resolve conflict from a masculine place, then it's going to work. But one thing I noticed a lot of was when they were talking about what they wanted out of the relationship, when they were talking about what they wanted out of the situation, you hear a lot of Devon saying he has certain standards. They say, I'm putting this to the side for her. I'm putting this to the side for her. I didn't want to marry an actress. I had a list. I didn't want to marry a woman who smokes. I didn't want to marry a woman who did this. I didn't want to marry a woman who did that. But he put all those things to the side for her. See, that's taking a feminine role. That means that you want the person more than you want to do things your way. I don't really see her bending on anything that she didn't want to do ahead of time. That celibacy thing was her idea before she met you.
Take this one.
Like, that was already a thing she was on. But you can't allow a woman's ego and her desire to be in a position to void the fact that she still has to be prepared to be in that position. Like, she was not prepared for the judgment and the criticism that would come from Christians for her dress in ways that most fundamental traditional Christians, which were their fan base, when you sell yourself in a way to where what's important to you is purity, right? Sexual purity, in the eyes of what that means in like religious traditional society, if that's how you sell yourself, then if you're showing anything about yourself after the fact, then you're going against your fan base. I just don't think that's a good fan base to choose. Like, if that's how you want to sell your marriage as a brand, that means you have to be able to play that role and to cover yourself up and not take sex scenes in movies. And she already had her mindset, her idea, her identity so well established and masculine that she wasn't moldable, she wasn't malleable. I didn't see any talk about them trying to have kids. I didn't see anything about her being in any way. She kept her last name, But what Devon did to solve conflict was, instead of just shoot it straight to her about certain things that just would not mesh with who he was as a man, instead of putting his program down, instead of him saying, "Nah, this is what I'm down for," he treated her with the utmost respect and communicated with her about everything in the way that you do when you go through counseling. And it's like, I'm gonna respect her. She can do what she wants to do. That doesn't mean that she should be your wife. Like, if she can't go through a process of doing the things that are necessary without resentment popping up, then you're just setting yourself up. You're taking a big gamble by doing that. And if you feel like somebody's so valuable to you that you want to take that gamble, that means you're in the feminine role. Like, as a woman, being with a man is a gamble, especially if you're going to be submissive with a man. I'm sure that's part of what y'all preach and talked about. But what creates natural submissiveness? There's no substitute for good deed and guidance. Anytime you hear an issue pop up between them, he did good to defend her, right? But how was he defending her? It seemed like he was defending her against things that represented himself, or at least his social image. So then he would make himself look like a hypocrite to do it. Because something that probably happened along that time was she was very sensitive. That sage burner to Topanga energy, right? So the sage burner to Topanga energy, that's the born again God told me Christian, right? That's the mindset of, I see sex as wrong, and in order to prove that I'm serious to God, I'm not gonna have sex. That's what that is, and when that's something that's present, something to understand is that it's not fully wanting to take a stance a lot of the time. It's like, let's say that in their relationship, it started off as she was doing certain things and he would encourage everything, but there wasn't enough challenge. There wasn't enough pushback for it. And probably by the time he did it, it was too late to where it started to hurt her ego. Because it called the daddy versus father effect. Even if you have guidance, if you're not bringing the pleasure that comes with it, not provision, not social status, if you're not bringing the pleasure that comes with her being able to be in her feminine energy when it comes to you, then she may respect you as a friend. She may respect you as a business partner. But that doesn't mean she's going to see you as daddy. It's not what that means. If you don't have the pleasure aspect of it, then if you're trying to put your rules and your program and your structure down, it's going to bring up feelings of reactance, right? You know, one thing that gets talked about a lot when it comes to, you know, ideas of emotional intelligence and counseling these days is the idea that every relationship should feel equal because you want to avoid somebody being hurt. Sometimes the hurt that people experience is simply reactance. And reactance isn't always something that's in people's best interest. Reactance isn't always something that is going to benefit what you say your goals are. And if you don't know what reactance is, it's basically just this internal feeling of desiring to rebel against something. It's don't think about a pink elephant. It's a desire to test boundaries and to break rules to try to re-implement a sense of self-worth. Now, Megan Good wasn't prepared for the position she had to play as a minister's wife. So she would go through times of being judged harshly from the public and not being prepared for that position. And then she would deal with the harshness of being, you know, judged by the public. She would shut down, or she would pull away, or, you know, she just eventually said, I can't really deal with that group of people. And the thing to understand about that is this. Either you make sure you're aligned in who you're selling yourself to, and you're aligned with your lifestyle and the message that you preach and who you're advocating for, so that your fan base and your support system and your demographics can be people who agree with your lifestyle. Or you take the correction that comes from people within that lifestyle, or you take what you need and take what you don't need. But simply getting hurt at how they're saying things to you is not going to help in any capacity. That creates reactance. But the thing to think about it was this. I bet this played a role in things ending with them. I bet this did right here. So as she started to feel like reactance towards church people, he would try to distance himself from the idea of looking churchy by being open and accepting to everything that she wanted to do. And some of those things may have been things that were really beneficial, that were really just a part of who she was. But somewhere along the way, he didn't examine those things as to whether some of those things she wanted to do were shit tests. And by not standing his ground on certain things until too late, she started to do more and more things that caused her to not respect him for feeling like he's going against his beliefs so that she could be happy and comfortable. Or that he's faking his beliefs to the public to be something else behind closed doors. But through that time, when he finally started to speak up, or he finally wanted to be more serious about maybe the religious aspects of his beliefs or something like that, maybe when that occurred, he started to express his dissatisfaction with certain things, which he should have laid down in his program. Maybe she wanted to continue to test him and go further and further and deeper into doing things that would be disrespectful to his public image. And then in the process of doing that, he started putting his foot down way too late. And then she started feeling like, you know what? This is a controlling environment. See, that's reactance. When that reactance kicks in, if the guilty pleasure isn't there with you as the man, if she doesn't feel you're her guilty pleasure, you know, sexually and otherwise, then what happens is, if you're not her solace, the place she goes to get rest, then all the guidance that you're given doesn't feel like you're trying to lead her towards pleasure. It feels like you're trying to lead her away from pleasure. that's a woman who's been out there, been with all kind of dudes for a long time. So she has a lot of experience. And with that experience comes, Devon Franklin probably ain't the top of that list. I mean, who knows? But what you got to think about is this. When the structure that you provide feels like it's taking away the validation or the sense of self-worth, or it feels like it's stripping that woman away from who she truly is, you find yourself in a situation to where she can only do that for so long before she baits and switches. And you feel like things going to be going for better for a little while, and it's going to get worse, or she'll try to be nice for public images, but it's not truly submissive. See, there's a difference between a nice girl and a feminine, submissive woman. It's two completely different things. She never really seemed like she was trying to give herself over to him. It seemed like they more so had an agreement on how they wanted to do something specific for a short period of time, and didn't really think about the long term. You know, in life, people change. There's a fork in the road that happens with relationships, where once you reach a fork in the road, that's where dominant, submissiveness, and masculine, feminine, that's where those things come into play. When you reach the fork in the road, that's where you say, either we're going to part ways, I'm going to follow you, you're going to follow me, or we're going to sit here and be stagnant until we figure it out. And after a while, whoever decides to become the most logical in that moment is just going to keep going in their direction. Whoever feels the least is going to keep going in their direction. And then you either part ways or you bend. And the more you can do the bending as a submissive individual, the more feminine you feel towards them, the more you respect and desire them as a man or as a woman, if that's the role you want to play. But the more you respect and desire them sexually as well, the more you feel that they're the place where you can go to get a great sense of pleasure, as well as some guidance and some structure, then it's going to feel like you're going towards pleasure when you bend and go their way instead of going your way, if it means you can't go there with them. But if a woman gets too masculine and gets really focused in her self-image and her ego gets really big, even if she's nice about it on the surface, then the idea of following you is going to go against what she desires. So it's going to be real wishy-washy. So you might agree on one day that, you know what, this is the direction I want to go in. So, okay, cool, we both want to do the same thing. All right, cool, that's cool. Cool, then you say you want to do that. But what you got to understand is this. Just because you were able to do that doesn't mean that that's a woman who will continue to follow you for an extended period of time if you change direction, or that she's not going to change direction. But that inner femininity in a woman is going to cause her to still desire somebody who's strong enough to tell her which direction to go. So a lot of times women don't know what they want, or they feel like they know what they want. But if a woman can win the game, like, that's the issue with act like a lady, think like a man. The issue with that type of mindset and mentality is that a woman who desires to be feminine, she'll never be happy with a man she feels she can control. She'll never be happy with a man she feels she can manipulate. She'll never be happy with a man she feels is overly predictable, right? Overly predictable in a way to where she knows how to act to get him to do what she wants him to do. Because she won't trust the solidity of his guidance. This man wasn't even thinking about making good. She basically came to him and said, hey, listen, God told me I'm going to be your wife. And he fell for like the oldest trick in Black church book. One of the oldest tricks. And she tried to keep up appearances for a while, but it got old. So listen, there's no substitute for good deed and guidance. There's no substitute for it. You can have all the money in the world, you can look as good as you want to look, you can have the right job position that makes you look good on paper, but you notice that the first thing she said when she was thinking about him is, wow, this is the type of man I want to marry. It's idealized with social programming to put less of an importance on sexuality so that a woman has more control over her emotions. Right? She didn't say, damn, he's sexy. She didn't say, yeah, I want to fuck him. I said, this is the man who I want to marry, or I want to marry a man like him. Meaning she wants a man who's going to look that way on paper so that she can get the social validation without actually thinking about the skills that it takes to be a wife for that kind of man over an extended period of time. Without thinking about what it takes to be on that man's program, just thinking, I like this image for myself. So, you know, that's Brody's take on the Devon Franklin and Megan Good situation.